Hello, everyone. Welcome to Bach Again, New Body, Old Soul. I'm Mary Jacobson, host of the morning show with Newburyport Community Media, and I'm thrilled and honored today to be interviewing Jane Ring Frank, who's director of the Cantemus Chamber Chorus here on the North Shore. Today, we'll be talking with Jane about the program she's put together to explore Bach's, affectionately and respectfully known by Jane as the Master, Bach's influence on 3 centuries of composers ranging from Mendelssohn to Paul Simon. But first, let's learn about and hopefully maybe even hear a bit from Cantemus. Jane, hello, welcome. It's great to see you. How are you
Hi,
today?
Mary. It's great to see you too. I'm doing well, thank you. All is well here in Zoom land. So it's a
Oh, wonderful.
pleasure to be with you as always.
It's great to see you. Well, let's begin with
Okay.
Cantemus then. Tell us about Cantemus as a group, how long they've been around, what kind of music you tend to perform and where, and how you describe the group's sound, what kind of audience you attract, and the impact that you aim to have.
Okay. You might have to get in there and remind me. Um, Cantemus was founded in 1982 with a very small cohort of singers, 12 to be
Wow.
exact. And it was the brainchild of conductor and Salem resident Ed Lundergan, who at the time was singing with the Paul Medor Chorale.
Mhm.
And there he met a woman named Donna Gale, also in the chorale. And Donna helped Ed found Cantemus, and she was the chair of the board for the first decade of the chorus's life. Why I say that is because Donna still sings with us today,
Great.
which is so exciting. Ed's dream at the time was to start a select chamber choir drawn from across the North Shore and even beyond, dedicated to exploring choral repertoire specific to the smaller chorus. Um, I think it's fair to say that the group has, through its history, performed a pretty bold and wide range of literature. I certainly have a no fear approach to programming. Um, the group has always performed in various venues on the North Shore. And of course, before the pandemic, we regularly gave 3 concerts per concert period in Newburyport, in Beverly, and in Swampscott. Okay, so well, for the sound, I imagine that the sound has changed over these years, and I always credit that to a number of conductors, all with varied tastes and values around sound. So I can really only tell you what I've been concentrating on with Cantemus for the time that I've been here, which is what I would call a less personal sound, um, which is a really nice way um, to suggest that I'm always looking for the high blend, less vibrato, unified vowels, precision in attacks and cutoffs, and enough, I think it's fair to say, a more British approach to choral singing. Um, and our aim is a little harder, I think, to talk about, but I hope that our aim is to create connections, connections between the ensemble and the audience, connections between what might be a seemingly disparate group of pieces on a program that are joined by common theme or poetry or historical period or many possibilities. Um, and then I'm always interested, my aim is to present a program without distractions. That's a nice way to say without odd mistakes and things. Um, that allows the audience to enter into a beautiful and hopefully well-crafted space.
Well, now, Jane, as someone who has been to a number of our concerts, I can say from personal experience that you succeed at all that. The sound is glorious and spectacular. I
Thank
mean,
you.
I definitely connect with the audience for sure, because I have been among the people who leap to their feet at the end
Oh,
and
that's
applaud
really nice.
with great enthusiasm. So well
Thank you.
put and well done. Well, Jane, this past year, has been a year like no other for choral groups. With a pandemic that is spread by tiny airborne droplets, choruses quickly became known as super spreaders and therefore had to abruptly stop both rehearsals and, of course, live performances. So, what it's been like for you and the Cantemus singers to have to abstain from singing together, and what have you missed the most?
Well, I'm not sure I have a lot of new ideas on this subject, but our last rehearsal in person together in the same room took place on Tuesday evening, March 10th of 2020.
Yeah.
And there's no sugarcoating it. For anyone that sings in a chorus, this has been very difficult. I think people sing in choirs for the intimacy that comes from closely listening to one another and from having a common goal. I think they sing for the social connections, for joy, for beauty, for laughter, for abject failure, and for some kind of musical redemption in the end, something that brings pleasure to others.
Yeah.
So I think it's been very hard, and it's been so surreal. You must understand this. It's been surreal in a way that the thing that brings us so much joy is not possible.
Yeah.
And we wait hopefully for
Yeah.
when that's possible again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can say that I've kept the group very busy.
Uh-huh.
Uh, perhaps not always to their joy and laughter, but I have engaged them in skill building.
Ah.
So it's what I've called choral CrossFit, Mary,
Oh,
to
okay.
try to spend this time getting in shape. So we've had
Uh-huh.
voice classes and sight singing, musicianship, improving our active and critical listening skills, deconstructions of major choral orchestral works, rehearsals, all virtual. So I have attempted to keep them, pedaling along.
You've been working out.
We've been working out.
But that's
Yeah,
great because those are the things sometimes you don't have time for when you're rehearsing and you have a concert performance in front of you.
that's
So,
right. That's right. We've just kind of grabbed that opportunity.
yeah.
I think that, from my own heart, I can say that I have missed rehearsal because I actually love rehearsal more than
Mm.
performance.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's that the surprise of perceiving the incremental improvements over
Mm-hmm.
time, what that
Yeah.
means, seeing light bulbs go off in singers' heads, the satisfaction of the music kind of finding and winding its way together. I
Yeah.
think that's what I have really missed.
Right. I totally understand that.
Yeah,
I really do.
yeah.
Well, so it's been a year of deprivation, but I understand that you recently found a very creative way for Cantemus to actually sing safely together. So, Jane, please tell us about driveway singing,
I will.
where the idea came from,
I will.
how driveway singing works, and the driveway choir that I believe Cantemus planned for March 23rd.
That is correct.
All
So
right.
the New York Times published an article in October of 2020, an extraordinary article about Bryce and Catherine Denny, who live in Marlborough, Massachusetts.
Mm-hmm.
They had, at the time, they were experimenting and developing ways for singers to safely sing together. And you are right, we became, quote, the driveway choir on March 23rd in the parking lot of the Topsfield Fairgrounds.
I love it.
So Bryce and Catherine Denny developed a way that each singer sings in their car using a microphone with mixing boards and an FM radio station through which each singer can hear each other with no latency and no delay. And it's extraordinary. It's
Uh-huh.
completely extraordinary. So I stood on a 4.5 foot platform
Uh-huh.
that they provided, and I conducted to a sea of cars, which was riotous. And Jeffrey Mead, our keyboardist, was about 10 feet from me playing keyboards, and we had a wonderful time. So we kind of jumped at those Denny's when that article came out in the New York Times.
I'll bet. And how did it feel to be able to actually sing together, even using this fancy technology, but nonetheless, you were all there in the same place, hearing one another sing? What was it like?
Well, I think it was wonderful. I think it was so surreal and odd and so joyful. And it offered this really wonderful normality for a brief moment. The singers couldn't get out of their cars and see each other and talk to one another, but they could. Anytime anyone spoke into a microphone, we all heard it and we all knew who it was. And so it was really delightful.
Uh-huh. Wonderful.
And we were lucky enough to have a videographer, a drone, and the Denny's record the piece. So we have a little documentary clip to show you and the audience about the Driveway Choir project.
Fantastic. Well, Jane, let's talk about next the program that you're giving us today. Why is it called Bach Again, New Body, Old Soul?
Well, I originally, Mary, programmed Bach Again many years ago with my colleague, Dr. Robert Fink, musicologist from UCLA, for my professional ensemble, Boston Secession.
Mm.
Um, I used a little bit of the same repertoire, but I really focused that concert on Bach's great keyboard prelude in C major, um, especially the way that it was transformed by Estonian composer Arvo Pärt in his terrifying Credo, which at the time he wrote as a kind of calculated spiritual and political response to the secularism and oppression of the Soviet government in Estonia.
Mm-hmm.
So for Cantemus, I shifted my view a little bit and really decided to concentrate on the chorales.
Mm-hmm.
And decided that what we could do is to really look at three of Bach's best loved and best known chorale tunes. They're sometimes called king chorales because
Ah.
they're so famous. So I think the old soul part is pretty obvious. Bach and that incredibly prolific output and the enduring magnificence of that output. The new body in the title is the subsequent use of those king chorales over time. You know, so many composers have used those tunes, as you said earlier, and those Bach harmonizations have been used by his children, by Mendelssohn, by Brahms, and on it goes.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a way to establish the tradition and move forward with it.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. And it would be helpful, I know, for me to get clear about what makes a chorale a chorale. How is it distinct from other types of
Right,
music?
right. Well, this is a really interesting question because it's a pretty strangely simple answer. Um, in general, a chorale is a musical composition consisting of a harmonized version of a simple tune,
Okay.
most often a hymn tune.
Ah.
Not always a sacred tune, but most often a sacred tune. So, but the word chorale has actually become synonymous with a four-part setting, often soprano, alto, tenor, bass, or four parts, four instruments, as a harmonization of that tune.
Mm-hmm.
And Bach, quite famously, harmonized these chorale tunes.
Mm-hmm. Well, that is a very straightforward description, which I'm always grateful for. That's great. Now, you selected three chorales, and let's see, out of how many chorales did Bach leave us?
Nearly 400 chorale settings.
well, 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 how hard was it for you to
Well,
narrow it down?
well, uh, he used these chorale tunes as the foundation of countless cantatas and passions and motets, some more famous than others.
Mm-hmm.
And within the church context, the chorale served this important function. So while Bach and other composers created contrapuntal, canonic, polyphonic, voices all interweaving and doing their thing, rhythmic textures for their works, Bach would often put a chorale at the end of his work as a way of providing the moral to the story.
Ah, okay.
So in that the context of the chorale, all four parts generally sing the same words at the same time in approximately the same rhythm. This is called homophonic texture.
Mm-hmm.
And that allowed the congregation to hear the message because the
Okay.
words were suddenly clear and straightforward. So he could spend pages and pages and pages writing the most incredible, not necessarily understandable
Uh-huh.
polyphony, this
Yeah.
incredible music, and at the end could punctuate it by saying, and here was the moral.
Right. Okay. Wonderful. Okay. Well, Jane, tell us about the first chorale that you've selected. I'm going to leave the German for you, but I understand the English is "Awake, the voice is calling." You can give us the German and tell us what this was based on.
Sure. So I chose three of what I think really are the most famous chorale tunes,
Uh-huh.
which is how I sort of sifted through. And the first is Wachet auf, ruft uns die Stimme. Exactly as you say, awake, the voice is calling. This is from Cantata 140, BWV 140 of Bach's, and it's also known as Sleeper's Wake.
Mm-hmm.
This was a church cantata that Bach wrote uh, and was performed in 1731. It's considered one of his most mature and really popular cantatas. The hymn tune we all know because it has translated into our hymnals as Sleeper's Wake, the voice is calling, and it's often used in the Advent and Christmas seasons. The original tune was not written by Bach. It is a Lutheran hymn, originally written in German by
Mm-hmm.
Philip Nicolai, and it was first published in 1599. So here is the first example of Bach taking a tune that he liked
Mm.
and harmonizing it into a chorale.
Okay, excellent.
Now, what I've done is asked our keyboardist, Jeffrey Mead, to provide a straightforward Bach setting of Sleeper's Wake, Wachet auf, so that the audience can hear the original.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. All right. And now, Jane, what later works will reveal the influence of this chorale? I think you have a couple of examples for us.
I do. I have two to talk about and one for you to hear a little bit of.
Okay, great.
Um, we have been working on two, quote, later works, beginning with one written by Bach's son, Johann Christoph Friedrich, JCF, as he is known,
Mm-hmm.
whom I think quite boldly set one of his father's powerhouse tunes. It is a three-movement work for strings, organ, and voices, and it's simple and buoyant and elegant and festive and joyful. It certainly doesn't have weight and heaviness and drama in the way that his father's might have, but it's nonetheless delightful. And I think it's as I was thinking about it, it's kind of an uncomplicated tribute to his dad. You know,
Oh,
it's
okay.
just straightforwardly beautiful.
Mm.
But the 20th century version that caught my ear is so kind of opposite to this, and this is an arrangement by Ward Swingle, who was
Mm.
a sort of thoroughly original conductor and arranger. He came into his critical acclaim in the early 1960s with the founding of the Swingle Singers.
Mm-hmm.
And they were known for taking jazz rhythms, simple scat, adding Baroque music, and creating this kind of cool, easy listening style. And that is the first example that I would love for you to hear. It's a little bit of the Swingle singers singing their version of what they call Sleepers Awake.
Great. Let's hear it. Well, all right, Jane, let's look at the second chorale. In English, Come Sweet Death, and with a melancholic title like that, I'm curious to learn the origin story for this work, and I'm sure you'll give us the German as well.
I will. So, Komm süßer Tod, Come Sweet Death, Come Blessed Rest. So this is an interesting story. This was written originally as a solo song for solo voice and basso continuo. And this was written by Bach himself. And by means of melody and harmony, Bach was expressing that very Lutheran outlook, desiring death and ultimately heaven and redemption. So the piece has a kind of sweet melancholy. And what I asked Jeffrey Mead to do is to give us, again, a very original statement of that chorale tune.
Wonderful. So after that now, let's hear your modern example. And what should we listen for in this modern example, Jane?
Okay. So Come Sweet Death has been set by many composers. Max Reger, Stokowski, Virgil Fox. But the one that fires my imagination is a realization, what I sometimes call a decomposition of the tune, called Bach Again. And of course, that's where I derived the title of the concert. This was written in 1976 by composer Edwin London, who died in 2013. He sets only the first 3 lines, they are in English, of the Bach chorale tune. He uses the harmonization that was created by F. Milius Christiansen, who was the papa of the St. Olaf School of Choral Music and Choral Conducting. And London creates what I call a planned improvisation. So when you hear the recording, you will hear the first 3 lines of the chorale straightforward. Come soothing death, come blessed repose, come lead me homeward, I'm turning. But then you hear each singer producing one note at a time, beginning softly, getting louder, and then softly again, a dynamic hairpin,
Mm.
taking a breath, and then moving on to the next note within each singer's breath capacity and time, and without care or worry about synchronization with a fellow singer. So, in fact, the more unsynchronized, the better. So, the sound is rich and full of overtones, which gives it an otherworldly quality. It's filled with tension and dissonance that resolves. So, it's the death part that resolves into redemption.
Mm.
And what I wanted to tell you for context, Mary, is that Ed was writing this. He had this idea, um, and when he developed this decomposition, it was the era of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her groundbreaking work on near-death experience. And she had in '69 written On Death and Dying,
Yeah.
outlining those 5 stages of grief from denial all the way to acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
So this was very present in his mind, and he was very interested. Ed was very interested in her book, The Tunnel and the Light, that described that near-death walk toward blissful and all-encompassing light. And he was so aware of her research and her thinking at the time that he heard this kind of decomposed tune as that long walk through the tunnel to the light. That these sounds are the sounds he imagined were the sounds that we would hear in this after near-death experience.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I know. It's just really, really wonderful. So the recording that I brought today is a recording that I made from the late 1990s with my professional group Boston Secession. So this is a recording of Ed London's Bach again.
Let's hear it. Well, that's really so intriguing, Jane. Thank you for playing that. Well, we have one more choral with the graphic and attention-grabbing title of "Oh, Head Full of Blood and Wounds." And I'm sure that's very dramatic in German. So please give us the German and tell us what the
Sure.
origin story for this is.
Sure. This is O Haupt voll Blut und Wunden. And you're exactly right, O Head Full of Blood and Wounds. This is best known as Bach's Passion Chorale, and translates into almost every hymnal as O Sacred Head Now Wounded, something I think so many of us know. But O Haupt voll Blut und Wunden has a kind of wild history, which is one of the reasons that I love this tune. It began its melodic life as a kind of saucy secular tune that was written in the year 1600 by the late Renaissance, early Baroque composer Hans Leo Hassler. The tune's title, Mein Gemüt ist mir verwirret, literally means my mind's confused within me. And this was kind of the late Renaissance version of I'm in love, I'm all shook up. And it had jaggedy dance rhythms, and this tune that we know as the Great Song of Sorrow began its days as just a good old-fashioned heartsick love song. So it was that true blurring of the secular into the sacred, which is kind of wonderful. So the text, as we know it now, is actually a German translation of a long medieval Latin poem, Salve Mundi Salutare, Salvation of the World. And in 1609, Lutheran theologian Paul Gerhardt translated it into German. This is how we arrive at the O Haupt voll Blut text that we know today. He adapted the seventh canto of this enormous Latin poem. But from there, composer Johann Kruger appropriated the Hassler tune and put Gerhardt's words to it, slowed it all down, put Gerhardt's words to it, and it appeared in 1656 as Kruger's hymn. Now we know, as we detangle all the threads, who all was involved. Bach, of course, hearing it from Kruger's hymnal in 1656, ended up using this tune almost more than any tune possible in all of his writing. He arranged the melody, and he used 5 stanzas of the hymn in 4 different harmonizations in the St. Matthew Passion. He used the hymn and the text in the second movement of Cantata 159. He used the melody with different words for the Christmas oratorio, and he kind of craftily disguised the tune for his Cantata 161. So he just kept churning that tune out in varying forms over and over again. So I asked Jeffrey to take one of the very straightforward harmonizations, the most famous from the St. Matthew Passion, and give us a listen.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I think most people will recognize that even if they didn't know the name of it, because
Exactly.
it is very familiar and very beautiful. And now we have that extraordinary context
Right.
that you provided to listen it to. So what modern composer provides your example of Bach's legacy?
So, as I said, so many composers set this very tune. So we've been working on a Mendelssohn piece. Liszt did a beautiful setting. Max Reger, the crazy organist, did an incredible kind of interesting, gnarly setting. But I went right to Paul Simon of Simon and
Ah,
Garfunkel. Um, I think that his rendering of this tune is kind of folksy and original, so much so that it was clear to me that most of my singers in Cantemus were not aware that American Tune is a retelling of O Sacred Head Now Wounded. I think they were very surprised.
mhm.
And what I love, and this is just because I'm weird, is that Paul Simon called this great German tune American Tune.
Ah,
And the text, I think, is as relevant today as when he wrote it in 1972. And I can't wait for you to hear this choral version arranged by my friend and colleague August Waters.
wonderful. Let's hear it.
Many's the time I've been mistaken, and many times confused. Yes, and I've often felt forsaken, and certainly misused.
It is such a beautiful song, Jane. And I'll admit that because when we talked preparing for this, I listened to the Paul Simon version, and I didn't realize. I mean, I'd heard the hymn before, I'd heard Paul Simon before, but somehow they just never made the connection. And do you find that you mentioned the chorus, a lot of people weren't aware of it. Do you find in general that most people are or are not aware of the connection between American tune? Not.
I do not think they are. And
Yeah,
I think it's a credit to how authentic the words are to what his own style of that tune.
yeah,
It's a credit to how um, it feels original in the
yeah,
best sense,
yeah.
and it's marvelous.
It is marvelous. Just such a brilliant songwriter. But
Yeah.
I'm curious, Jane, to hear what your thoughts are about this. What do you think we miss out from not being able to make the connections that you've been making for us between Bach, the master, and his musical lineage, including Paul Simon?
Well, what do we miss out? I mean, listening to Bach, we don't miss anything, right? I mean, however we each respond to it, with knowledge or without, is why it is such a magnificent output. Um, I'm so interested, as I said to you, about making connections, often between these kinds of pieces that seemingly don't go together. That for me, it's always about just finding those little roads where the convergence occurs.
Yeah.
And I think that what is so great about this music is that it can be heard, as with Paul Simon, completely on its own or in context to Bach. And they
Yeah,
either stand together, but they also stand apart very beautifully.
absolutely. Well, Jane, this has been wonderful. Thank you for the gift of Bach today, and for Bach's legacy composers, and for teaching us about Cantemus, and for the wonderful image of the driveway choir. So, Jane, when are you hopeful that you may be able to actually rehearse and perform together again?
So, I mean, this is the big unknown. I think
Yeah,
that we're waiting to get good direction. I'm reading everything, and every other conductor is too,
yeah,
and all singers are too. I think we hope to come back in some form in the fall. We don't know what that means yet.
yeah.
And I think that nobody really knows what it's going to look like. When we do come back, we certainly are. We were rehearsing this marvelous program, this fun program, when we stopped rehearsals, and I know that we would like to get back to bringing this program to life. And that's one of the first things that we will
Okay,
do is kind of get ourselves back on track.
right. Any breadcrumbs for us about what that program might be when you're able to gather together again?
Well, we'll certainly bring this Bach again program.
Oh,
Uh,
I'm
this will
so
be
glad to hear that.
Oh yeah, we will. That's it. Hasn't died. We just
More.
had to. Yeah, and we're looking toward. It's hard for me to believe, but the group's 40th anniversary
Oh,
um,
wow.
is coming in 2022. So the big hope,
Oh.
the little breadcrumb, and I'm not sure if we'll be able to pull it off. But my goal is to present Paul Winter's Missa Gaia, the Mass for the Earth,
Mm. Oh,
which requires a huge amount of jazz and classical forces. And um, I have conducted the piece in the past, and I think it's just it's a marvelous honoring of Mother Earth, and it's beautiful. So that's our hope for the anniversary.
oh, that sounds very exciting, and a fitting and dramatic way to celebrate the 40th anniversary of Cantemus, which is very exciting. Well, we'll all be looking forward to that. Jane, I can't thank you enough. This has just been wonderful. So much fun and so fascinating. You have such a way of making even the more esoteric concepts like polyphony very clear and straightforward for everybody. I guess it's not that esoteric. It's just a multisyllabic word. But anyway, you just are wonderful at what you do. And thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking to you about this. And best wishes. We've all got our fingers crossed for the soonest possible safe way for us all to
That's right.
gather again, both as singers and as audiences at performances. Thank you, Jane, so much.
Thank you so much, Mary. What a pleasure. I really appreciate your time.
Totally my pleasure.
Okay.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Take care.